Alright, guys, today I'm going to do even a little more work on Scott Levy. And I wanted to start by actually listening to some other people talk about him. So I came across something interesting on Wikipedia about this fellow named Stevie Richards, who had allegedly done some work with Scott Levy. They had been some kind of rival characters or something. They worked together. Now, I've never watched wrestling, it's never been my thing. But then I came across something interesting on the Wikipedia for the Raven. I came across this interesting passage, and it says that between 1995 and 1997, it says, after leaving the WWF, Levy began developing a new character, Raven, inspired by the poem by Edgar Allan Poe and by Patrick Swayze's manipulative Zen master of crime in the film Point Break. The Raven character was a depressed, sociopathic, stoical, nihilistic misanthrope who would deliver eloquent, philosophical promos peppered with literary allusions and ending with the catchphrase, quote the Raven, nevermore. Levy dramatically altered his appearance, bulking up to approximately 235 pounds, adding nose and eyebrow piercings, and began wrestling in ragged jean shorts, a leather jacket, rock band or comic book t-shirts, combat boots, and a flannel tied around his waist. After unsuccessfully pitching the character to Jim Cornette, the owner of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Raven approached Paul Heyman, the booker of the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania-based promotion Extreme Championship Wrestling, who agreed to bring in Raven as a foil for Tommy Dreamer. I want elimination by any means necessary, quote the Raven, nevermore. Raven was introduced to ECW by Stevie Richards. In late 1994, Richards had developed an identity crisis, performing under the ring names Stevie Flamingo, Stevie the Body, and Stevie Polo, all references to former ring names used by Levy. After sustaining another loss to Tommy Dreamer, Richards became irate and claimed he would present the real Johnny Polo. Raven made his first appearance on January 10, 1995, with Richards revealing that he had a vendetta against Tommy Dreamer. So I want to just understand the significance of what's going on here. So I've never been into wrestling, and I know that in wrestling there are kind of a lot of gothic characters, but I'm not sure to what degree did Scott Levy, did he start that? I'm asking, did he kind of lead the way for a gothic character who wears eyeliner? I'm not sure. But it sounds like from this description, like he pitched the character to the owner of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and it was unsuccessful. So earlier in this Wikipedia page, it says that Scott Levy had gone by Scott Flamingo and that he would actually come up to the ring with a surfboard. So when they're wrestling, they're also storytelling, and that's part of what makes it such an interesting sport. It's like half drama, half acrobatic, violent fighting, and they really are going home with bruises and stuff. I understand, like when you take a dive off of the side of a ring and hit the canvas, that's real. Even though the storylines are all narrated, they're all fabricated. So he's pitching this idea and he's getting turned down. So what does that have to do with objective personality? I would argue that one of the big differences between DI and DE is that DI is manufacturing identity. So DI can be compared in a certain sense to Oh, why? Because it's creating something, it's crafting something. So when he creates this Raven character, it's very creative and he crafts something. It's a new identity. And yes, he got it, it was inspired by a poem, but he still was the one to synthesize all that. And then he brings it to a guy and he says, okay, listen, listen, listen. So I got this idea for a character. He's called the Raven, and he cites this poem. And you can just see maybe the first guy he pitched it to thinking, no, this is ridiculous. Who's going to want to watch that? He's this. Why would I want to watch a stoic, nihilistic, gothic guy? Well, that's actually a really good villain because he's like, it's like Darth Vader or something. It's just, he's dark, he's angry, he's brooding. Then when you hear from this passage by Stevie Richards, it says in late 1994, Richards had developed an identity crisis, performing under the ring names Stevie Flamingo, Stevie the Body, and Stevie Polo. All references to former ring names used by Levy. So Levy had came up with all of these names, I think long before 1994, when he was just starting out. And now when Richards wants to come into the Extreme Championship Wrestling, I'm sorry, when Raven comes into Extreme Championship Wrestling, it's Stevie Richards who introduces him. So what's going on here? It sounds to me like Stevie Richards might be a DE type because he's having an identity crisis, but he's also introducing Raven. So that's what the DEs do. They bring people in. They bring people in. DEs include other people, and they want to be included, and they're really good at being included, at figuring out how to get in with other people. DIs, because they're working so much on that identity, they sometimes don't get included because their identity is too different. But if you don't have an identity, then you don't have a character. You don't have someone that anybody can love. You don't have somebody that anybody can hate. You don't have somebody that anybody can remember if the DI function is not working. So when we hear that Stevie Richards is just taking Raven's identities, that tells me that, well, what is the DE doing? It just wants to be included, and it doesn't want to think about identity that much. So it just goes, oh, I'll just take all of your identities that you spent years churning up and suffering in. Think about it. If you go by the name Stevie Flamingo or Scott Flamingo, that's your identity for years, and that's your show name. So an identity is a big commitment, and that's hard for EJs. They're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to put on an identity. What if it doesn't work? What if I'm not compatible with other tribes as a result of me taking on this identity? Whereas a DI user, they're just like, you know what? Let's do it. I'm going to put on this new identity. This is going to be who I am. And I'm going to go by this name. So the naming of yourself and the christening of yourself as a character, that is a big part of DI, and that is kind of like, it's partially extroverted. It's like, hey, look at who I just made myself. Like, you have to go away though to do that, and you have to be alone, and you have to think, and you have to go, or feel, and you have to go, man, who should I be? Who am I gonna be? Well, I'm dark, I'm brooding, I feel like a misfit. Oh, and I watched this TV show and this guy's dark. You know what? This character could really work. So that's enough about the Wikipedia. Let's hear from Stevie Richards. I just want to see, what does he have to say about Raven in this video.
But Hogan had to watch out more for Raven because Raven was an overact coming in to WCW. You talk about a guy who made the cover of the video game, WCW versus NWO. With the NWO. Like, the WCW guy you picked was Raven. I mean, that's a guy, I'll go, we'll talk about it, but I owe my career to that guy. I say it all the time. And Raven should have been a much bigger star. and made millions of dollars in this business, much like a Sabu and other guys that gave everything.
I'm interested now. So Hulk and Raven then. So this is off the top of my head. I'm sure you'll correct me, but he starts appearing in the crowd for weeks or even months on end. In storyline, he's got a really special contract where he can basically dictate his own terms. You come in quite soon afterwards. But you mentioned Hulk and Raven then. So Raven was on Hulk's radar very early.
If he wasn't on his radar, he was on the radar of somebody close that was giving him tabs about Raven being over or here and there. But with the hype and with everything, and obviously Raven had a great introduction by not wrestling and getting the character over and having me there to take all the punishment. I mean, I think it was like 8 weeks of contract negotiations and holding hands with JJ Dillon and dragging him down to the thing. Dude, I have to say about that segment, that's probably one of my favorite segments of all time, is being able to riff and improv with JJ Dillon and Gene Okerlund live in front of a crowd. All that stuff was not even rehearsed. Like, you had bullet points that he's going to tear the contract up. He's going to hit me. We didn't even have an outline, but that's what we had Gene Okerlund for. And just I saw so much potential in that. And even JJ, like legitimately playing it up super serious, and me dragging him by the hand and telling him he needs the exercise. Like that's what's missing today, of being able to kind of make fun of the authority figures and make them kind of a goof on the situation.
I find it quite sad.
So Richard says, I owe my career to Scott Levy, to Raven. And I'm guessing that's related to the Wikipedia passage that we just saw. I haven't seen this yet. But you notice how when Richards talks, he's just talking about other people the entire time. And he's like, yeah, I owe... When you listen to Raven, he's not saying, I owe my career to anyone. He never says that. He's not talking about all these other people in an addictive state. Richards just mentioned like 5 or 6 different unique individuals who he worked with, and in this beautiful savior state. Richards, he has this beautiful countenance, almost as if he won in the end. When I look at Levy, he doesn't look so good. Something went wrong when I look at a guy like Scott Levy. So I'm going to say, we hear, unlike Levy, Richards has a frog in his pocket. Does Levy have Savior DI?
Almost. That the flock never really mixed with the NWO at all. And now that you've said, well, Hulk Hogan saw Raven and how popular it was, do you think maybe the Ravens flock thing maybe would have been more popular, but the fact that they already seemed like they were going to be maybe popular enough to maybe challenge the NWO in that sense sort of kept them a rung below?
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying, I don't know if Dutch ever brings it up, but do good, but don't do too good.
What was it? Sorry, I was coughing all over that. I muted it, but...
How dare you?
Sorry, say it again.
There's a saying in the locker room most times, do good, but don't do too good.
Uh-huh.
You should do too good, theoretically, but sometimes when you do too good, too fast, you get on those radars and you don't have the political strength or affiliations to prevent getting buried or prevent getting your legs cut out from under you, which I believe Raven in the end, like you look at his contributions, especially in WCW, he was the first guy to give Goldberg a competitive match that made sense and made Goldberg even more over. Like Goldberg was selling for the first time and got more over as a babyface in the end. That's Raven. Raven put that together. Raven made that happen, and Raven brought Goldberg way up to the next level.
Yeah, I love the flock where I'm sure Raven describes it a way I can't remember, but it's essentially almost like the comedy way of doing a run-in, but only one at a time. Not everybody go. What's that?
Dog and Pony Show.
The Dog and Pony Show. Yeah, it's so classic wrestling that it doesn't make sense to anyone who doesn't get wrestling, but within the sphere of wrestling, it's the best thing in the world.
I would tell somebody if they're ever in a real fight, it looks like the recreated NWO surrounding Sting in the ring, it's not going to end the same way. They're not going to feed you one at a time to get jammed with a bat and wait.
So I don't really understand wrestling or what they're talking about, but it sounds like the promoters, I'm just guessing here, it sounds like the promoters are selecting who wins based on who is generating more revenue. So if that's the case, then I would win a fight if I'm performing really well and if my lines are really generating a lot of hype, and if there's more pay-per-views, I guess, that come as a result of me. So if that's the case, then you're going to see people having to use DI and DE. And then they're also going to have to be really athletic and really tough. So this is going to involve a lot of skills, like a lot of skills. And yeah, that definitely raises my level of respect for what this is. Because that's an enormous amount of skills. And what he's saying there, do good, but don't do too good, that's really interesting. He brings up politics, that's very DE, but then he brings up going up a level. That tends to be a little more DI. The reason I say that is because I think that DE, once you become acceptable, once you become everybody else's equal, then you're part of the in group. You're no longer being excluded because you can't do basic DE stuff. And then now it becomes a competition of DI. Once we all agree that we belong here, then now the DIs start to compete. And the DEs will heal and they'll reconcile. The DEs within us all will heal and reconcile, but the DIs within every person will start to compete. And that's true for an EJ as well. So an EJ has, I'm assuming Stevie Richards might be an EJ. So Richards has a DI. So he's talking about Raven went way up, but that's because he's doing DE at the same time. He's also working with other people and being political, perhaps. So it sounds to me more and more like Levy was this DI guy who kind of got snubbed, perhaps because he wasn't as good at the DE. I'm not sure. So as you can see here, here's Raven in the ring. He's in his full uniform and he's sitting down. So when I see a lot of pictures on Google Images of Scott Levy, I see there's a lot of instances where he's like just sitting in the corner of the ring, angry. That's funny. That to me, that strikes me as maybe sleep or even play last. Like he's this wrestler. Thousands of people are here to see him, and he's just sitting there in so many pictures. So he does seem sleepy to me. And this is kind of a guess. I don't have great evidence for this. So here I'm going to listen to two other guys talk about him.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Slamtown. I'm Mike Ginn. That's Dan Bakley. Back again to talk the Raven effect. Today we're talking about Scott Levy, a.k.a. Raven, his impact on the wrestling business, and will Raven ever be in the Hall of Fame? That seems to be the question going around now that he's starting to do interviews and other things. But first, go ahead and check out FightersFirst.shop. Dan, we're back this week to talk Raven. He finally crawled out of the basement. He had famously kind of like showed up during COVID, and he didn't really want to kind of come out, didn't want to talk to anybody. And after a couple years of not touring, not doing other stuff, he kind of said, well, maybe I'm done. But he's kind of changed his mind a little bit. He said maybe next year he might do a few appearances. Maybe his career is not quite over yet. He's not like incredibly old for the wrestling business. He is, I want to say, 58, which last episode we just talked about Great Buddha and Sting. That's a baby in this, like compared to them.
Yeah.
but he also doesn't have a very high flying style. Like he's very psychological. He's very whatever. So he could have a couple of matches here and there and not really tarnish any of his legacy. But before we go down the rabbit hole of what his career is, right off the bat, don't you kind of have to put a character like Raven in the Hall of Fame eventually? Because he has a long tenure with WWE. He does have a tenure with WCW, which WWE bought, ECW, which WWE bought. So if you have all these tape libraries that you make a lot of...
Okay, so I'm going to say something really, really, really annoying. Just because Mike Ginn is talking about Raven doesn't mean this is a DE conversation by Mike Ginn. Mike Ginn is talking about Raven's character. And when you talk about another person's character, even though that's you talking about another person, which we usually use to track DE, when we're talking about DI, and I'm talking about your DI, that's actually still DI in me. We're talking about who we are, who you are, and who I am. Oh, so who's he and who am I? Who are our identities? I'd argue that that might still be DI in me, right? In my last video, Raven is doing an interview with this fellow who also seems quite DI to me. This guy, he's got jet black hair. I can't remember his name, but he had another wrestling channel where he interviews wrestlers, and he's talking to the Raven. This is in my last video. And he says, so you were Scotty Flamingo for a while. And then you came in as a manager. Tell me about that. So he's going, so this was your DI. They're talking DI. They're talking shop about DI. They're going, wait, so this was your identity. This was the person you crafted with that introverted identity building function. Tell me about that. Tell me about this character you crafted. Whereas when we hear a guy like Stevie Richards, he's going, yeah, we had to improvise. We had to work together. We had to be political. Here's what we would say in the locker room. Richards is talking about an almost improvisational function, because DE, it's kind of like OE. It wants to figure something out once it encounters the landscape of identities. So DE's like, okay, let me just feel out what is, or I guess with TE, it's figure out what the landscape of identities and what everybody is doing as a group identity. I guess even the landscape of identities, you're already fracturing into a bunch of different DIs. DE is going to see it as one big continuous identity. That's a tribe. Every little fractured identity, those are all DIs. Right.
Like money off of, he's a large part of those tape libraries. Doesn't he deserve to be in eventually?
Yeah, he brought the ECW style to both WCW and WWE. He had his own stipulation match, the Ravens Rules match, which he used in almost every match.
Don't forget in TNA that he's the one that introduced the Clockwork Orange match. Yeah, CM Punk and all that stuff.
Yeah, you got Impact. He just was inducted into the Impact Hall of Fame at Bound for Glory just last month. To me, he's revolutionized that hardcore style without even being crazy hardcore, if you had to think about it. Like, it was all about...
He uses weapons once in a while. He'll bleed once in a while, but he's not going like New Jack on you.
Yeah. It's all about psychological with him, with that psychology. He was brainwashing opponents, and then they would join the Ravens flock, and that was a whole big thing there, was him on the mic. That's one thing that's always underutilized about his career, has been his mic work, his promo skills, because he did a wonderful job with that. But people always talk about the hardcore style with him, when in fact, probably one of his best things was his mouth.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to remember, look, for one, Scott Levy is old enough to be a part of the territories, right?
Yeah.
He traveled a few of the territories of the Pacific Northwest and some other places before he ever showed up on any camera on a major scene. So he got taught the business. I don't know if you want to say.
So listen, I think when you look at Levy, he kind of seems like a bird chirper kind of guy. But to be honest, when I hear other people talk about him, when I listen to his consciousness, I get the sense that he has the blast animal and that he's missing the play animal, and that a lot of the problems in his life came as a result of bailing out with that play last. That play last, it just pulls the cord and says, I'm bailing out. But it sounds like with his blast with his blast third, he's so good at mic work. He's so good at crafting a narrative. He's controlling things. He's got his own matches with a rule set, with his own rule set. Something like the Clockwork Orange rule set. So he's working with the boss and he's stipulating, hey, I want this match with my own rule set. And then it says he's psychologically brainwashing other guys. I don't know. I've never seen him perform, but it sounds like there was some kind of bit where Scott Levy would go up to a guy and like brainwash him or something. Listen, that's blast. That's blast. That's Darren Brown. When you, especially in the Beta Quadra, when you brainwash another person, that's my OI controlling your DE. So I think that's a lot of evidence for Scott Levy being consume, sleep, blast, play. Not consume, sleep, play, blast. Okay, so this is where I left off in the last video with this guy called 10 Count Media. And this is where I left off. In the last video, what I established is that I actually thought, contrary to what you would think, that Levy sounds like the double decider here. And 10 Count Media, he sounds like a single decider. So let's continue to watch and let's see, does that pattern really play out, or do I have it backwards?
Well,
A
yeah,
long time ago.
of course. But, these are the stories that people would like to be known about because, again,
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about those stories because, between suing the company and, WWE and counter shoots and stuff, I'm really not allowed to talk about them anyway. So.
oh, okay. Well, one final question about that situation then is, did you actually have when you were leaving the WWE, did you have an exit interview with Vince McMahon?
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that a common thing in professional wrestling, exit interviews?
No, because I was an office employee.
Okay.
I was under an office contract.
Okay. Yeah. Because it was always bizarre.
So this guy on the right keeps bringing up people, and Levy keeps bringing up things. Am I wrong? Levy's going, I don't want to talk about that because he's saying, I don't want to talk about that. Between the stealing of the company, something like that, I don't want to talk about that. And this guy on the right's going, oh, sure, you don't want to talk about that. Like, to a double observer, if something's 10 years ago and it's a control chaos problem, you can talk about it. Why? Because you know that you can just fix it with like an email or something. So he's almost... Let's watch it again.
You're your boss. You're the employee.
Yeah,
He's not treating you any different from before and after.
After he treated me probably a little different. I don't know. I don't remember. It's a long time ago. It's 1993.
Well,
It's a long time ago.
Of course. But, these are the stories that people would like to be known about because, again...
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about those stories because, between suing the company and, WWE and counter shoots and stuff, I'm really not allowed to talk about them anyway. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
Between stealing the company and WWE and counter suits, so lawsuits, I'm really not allowed to talk about that stuff. So it sounds like there was some lawfare that happened. And maybe Levy was like, I don't know, he was writing programs and stuff. He was involved in the organization. He was getting these from that last video. He was getting stipulations in his rule set. Like, it sounds to me like Levy is a single observer. Maybe he got too controlling or something, but then this guy on the right from 10 Count Media, he's like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, you don't want to get into a lawsuit. That's just not something double observers are afraid of, because they know that there would be like a way, way longer progression before you actually get into the courtroom that involves a bunch of people and their emotions. So before there was an actual lawsuit, there would be an email. And in the course of that email, you could use your double observers to neutralize that problem. You would have to send an email back. They would send another email. The information would slowly... So when a double observer hears, I'm not allowed to say that because of a counter lawsuit. What? You just said it's from 1993. You just said it was a long time ago. So you can't talk about it after what? 30 years? You're still afraid of a lawsuit?
One final question about that situation then is, did you actually have when you were leaving the WWE, did you have an exit interview with Vince McMahon?
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that a common thing in professional wrestling, exit interviews?
No, because I was an office employee.
Okay.
I was under an office contract.
Okay. Yeah. Because it was always bizarre when I read that. I was like, how?
I think, but I don't know. I don't know for sure because I don't remember. You know, I mean, I think, and I'm not sure what exactly an exit interview consists of, you know, other than hi and goodbye. I mean, you know, like, because I never had a real job, you know. So I just don't know what an exit interview is supposed to like. Is it supposed to take an hour? Is it supposed to take 10 minutes? Is it just say thanks for your services? I mean, so, you know, so besides being a long time ago, it's also, I'm not exactly sure what constitutes an exit interview.
Yeah. And did you get benefits while you were also an office employee?
Yeah.
So did other wrestlers know of this?
Maybe.
I imagine they wouldn't be too happy because obviously as years have gone on, there's always been talks of unions, insurance, health insurance, dental, all that stuff, but you're getting it while you're also on the road as a performer.
Yeah, but I was only on the road, you know, for TV.
So the guy on the right, he's from 10 Count Media. He's talking about perks. Did you get this? Did other people, were they upset about this? Like, it, to me, the single decider talk, it's a lot about like dominance and hierarchy and favoritism and who's better and who's winning and who's getting perks. Whereas the single observer double decider, he's like, what even is a contract? How would you say goodbye? And when it comes to the people, he's like, yeah, they were just the people. I don't even remember. That was so not a problem for me, but I still remember that I was under contract. I still remember that I was an office worker. I still remember that was my job. Right? Because let me explain this. If you're a single observer, having a job is a big deal. Because signing all that paperwork to get a job, that takes a lot out of you. You're like, oh my God, I'm still signing contracts. Is this gonna control me for the rest of my life? So let's keep watching. Are we gonna continue to see observer fear from Scott Levy, and control chaos talk and thing talk? And are we gonna continue to see people and social status and fairness or privilege talk from 10 Count Media? Let's see.
And stuff mostly, and some house show runs, like local, you know, within 3-hour drive house show runs. But mostly I was in the office, you know, during the week.
Man, it's funny though, because when you leave the WWE, suddenly we get introduced into the Raven character. And where did this come from? Because again, we saw Scotty Flamingo, we've seen Johnny Polo. How did you reinvent yourself, and why did you want to do this?
I was talking to DDP one day, and I was complaining about the lack of usage of chicken shit heels in the business. Scotty the Body, Scotty Flamingo, I was a great chicken shit heel, and nobody. He goes, Page goes, DP goes, nobody's buying them because you're gonna have to be a tough guy. I go, yeah, but everybody's a tough guy. It's a dime a dozen. He goes, well, that's what you're gonna have to do. He goes, you ought to go alternative. Like you look, because I dressed like in real life, like I did as Raven. So he's like, you ought to go alternative, like the Red Hot Chili Pepper guys looked in that Point Break movie.
So this is what DI does. It's reinventing itself. It's going, okay, would I be this person or this person or this person or this person? And everybody's like that. That's what's confusing. That's what's confusing about DI versus DE. You see, in the case of OI and OE, you see that the extroverted observer is looking for differences and the introverted observer is looking for sameness. Yet in the case of DI and DE, there's a sense in which the DE is trying to integrate into a single community and try to make everyone the same. Whereas the DI is trying to look different. The DI is trying to be different. So that's what's confusing, is that's kind of the commonality between DI and OE, is trying to be different. And maybe that's why the Myers-Briggs clumped consume types and blast types and just completely missed the sleep and play types, is because the DI-OE types, they're all about being different.
Yeah.
And so I took that snippet, and I decided to make it a tough guy, but I put all the unique style to it, because I didn't want to just be your regular old tough guy. You know what I mean? I wanted to be, I wanted to be a three-dimensional character like nobody had done before. Where where you could tell where like the character had a certain behavioral patterns, and you would know what he would do in certain situations. You know what I mean? That you would understand him on a deeper level. And you could see his point of view even if you didn't agree with it.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And again, the idea of involving DDP, he talks to you about this alternative to the world, because ECW really was, I guess, I know Paul Heyman said like a million times, like the grunge of, because we had tax evasion wrestlers, we had Indians, we had cowboys, we had all these people, and here comes Raven, who is, to a lot of us, real. This person we can talk to, relate to, and understand.
Right, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to, but I wanted you to understand me and relate to, but then be appalled at the direction I would take with it. And that's why there was always a 10% of fans that were going to cheer me no matter what. But I tried to eliminate that 10%, because, you don't, a true heel, I'm one of the only people in the business that I know that really enjoyed being a heel, that wanted to be a heel. Most people want to be a heel so they don't get booed as a baby face, or they want to be, at least back in the day, they would want to be a baby face, a heel who's cheered, which is the easiest thing to be. It's easy to be a heel who's cheered. Being a heel who's hated, with the way people are in the world, it's difficult, to be truly hated and to keep making fans. This what happens is when you become talented, at a certain point, people recognize your talent, and they see that, wow, his talent should be rewarded by us cheering him. But but a true heel doesn't want to be cheered for being rewarded, and so you have to find ways to show your ass, like to show how despicable you really are. That's why, like, when fans started to like me, I took Sandman's wife, and then I took his kid, and whereas.
So I'd argue that that's something that would be difficult for a single decider to do, perhaps. What he's doing there is this very complex move, actually. He's going, no, I don't want to be cheered. Even when I get famous, I don't want to be cheered. I still want to be the villain, because that's unique, and that's the more difficult path. So he's challenging himself in the double deciders, I would argue. So what I'm seeing from Scott Levy is more of a type like this. And I know he sounds like he's Blast Last. And I know he sounds like he's a decider. But I'm not seeing those coins. I see the feminine DI. I see that he kind of seems double masculine. But let's talk about the real controversy here. Is he a single decider or a double decider? Is he play last or blast last? Not.
So you couldn't like me, so no matter how much you could break it down, it was almost impossible to like Raven, which like one of my greatest compliments I ever got was Simon Diamond said that all his friends came up to him and said, he goes, Raven really is bigger an asshole as he seems on TV. I was like, and he's like, and I'm like, and he did it kind of like, he kind of like, I don't know if you're gonna like this. I'm like, no, that's brilliant, that's great, that's what I want people to think. I want them to think I'm the character, because Piper taught me a long time ago that it's as long as they believe in your character, it doesn't matter what else happens on the show, as long as they believe in your character, And so Piper was always, no matter what happened in any other match, you knew Piper's was as close as you came to thinking it was real. You know what I mean? And I think I did as well as a job as could be done. That I truly hated Dreamer, and that and the reasons why, and then but the despicableness of what I would do to him. It takes work, it takes a lot of effort to be hated. It's easy to get cheered. It's easy to get cheered if you're a heel, and it's easy to get booed if you're a baby face. But it's easy to be liked and it's easy to be disliked. But to be hated and loved, that's the goal. You want to be. And to me, I wanted to be hated more than my opponent was loved. Like I wanted them to chant "fuck Raven," "fuck you Raven," more than I wanted them to chant "go Tommy go." Now I would never stack the deck to make it like that. I would never set up spots. So that I would never set up the match in a way that would hurt him at all. I would never do anything negative to my partner. But I wanted the people to hate me more than they loved him,
Yeah, of course.
And so that was but that's an art form. Wrestling's an art form.
So this sounds like Blast to me. He's trying to control the tribe's perspective. That's the thing about Blast. It's not just I being disseminated. It's also I have an understanding of the tribe. And that actually involves kind of taking them in. So taking the DE into your OI, I would argue, has to happen. Not just feeding the OI out to the DE. So I'm hearing a consciousness of both of those things there. He's going, well, I want to be hated more than the hero is loved. And I'm not sure what a heel means. But to me, this sounds like Blast consciousness. He's controlling what other people are seeing. Whereas Play wants to do something off the cuff. It wants to see what might happen. And he's saying, I would never set it up so that my opponent got hurt. So that's Blast consciousness again. I'm controlling the situation. I'm controlling the drama. And notice earlier in the interview, the guy goes, hey, can you tell me about what happened with your exit interview? And he goes, I don't want to talk about that. So that's kind of like Jerry Seinfeld denying Kesha a hug. He's like, I don't want to take the interview there. I don't want to. That's Play last. I don't want to jump over that fence. No, thank you. So even though he's got this kind of sour face and he can barely talk and everything he says is interrupted with pauses and awkward speech and he's tripping over his own speech, that's not the definition of Blast last. I'm hearing Blast consciousness. And I'm seeing him deny the Play over and over and over. So I'm going to put Blast above Play.
It really is when it's done right. But like, I don't watch it now. I haven't watched it in years. I stopped watching back when he had the Alliance angle, when they brought in WCW and ECW guys and all that. and they push nobody, and it just I got so disenchanted with the business that I stopped watching it, and I never started watching it again. I think I'd seen it, had been a part of some of the best angles in wrestling, and saw, watched them, and I just, plus I'm a completist. So like if I watched Raw, I'd have to watch Raw, I'd have to watch SmackDown, I'd have to watch everything, and there's too much, there's too much on TV to watch, and I didn't have enough time in a day to watch all the wrestling shows, and so I just never went back. It's funny because people always ask me, they're like, don't you watch it anymore? And and a lot of old timers say, oh, I don't watch it anymore, and they're just, but they do, they just don't want to admit to it, because they don't want to, well, for whatever reason. I don't have any problem admitting it. If I did, I just don't.
There's a lot of wrestling
and
out
it's
there.
It's also a little heartbreaking because I never got to be the top guy at the top company, you know. So so watching it brings a little sadness to me, So I don't know.
Well, I think today
Yeah, so I'm seeing that type, and I'm not seeing any of the coins move that I've argued for here. When he says he's a completist, that sounds like consume, that sounds like sleep. When he says he got disenchanted, that sounds like demon blast, demon play. So yeah, again, I'm seeing. That's just so funny the way he said that. He's like, I'm a completist. I'd have to either watch it all or not watch it at all. That's funny. I think I'm kind of the same way, being play last. So again, I'm seeing this type for Scott Levy. All right, guys, I think that's about it. I know this one was a little longer, but I felt like it was a lot more maybe genuine and complete. So I thought it went really well, and you can let me know what you think, and let me know. Do you think I'm wrong about any of these coins? Do you think I'm seeing any of them off? Do you think he's got SI? I don't. Do you think he's got TE? Do you think he's got what? What might I be missing here? Let me know. If people don't want to get it spoiled, they won't click on the video. So just let me know. Let me know in the YouTube comments, and let me know, where do you think I'm wrong? Thanks so much, guys. See you later.